So what's really going on with the schools, folks? I know a lot of you want to know. And it is a local issue, it's a national issue, and it's a hugely political one. To walk us through what's really happening with whether schools will be open or not and what's going on behind the scenes, we have Inez Felcher with us now. She is a policy analyst at the Independent Women's Forum and knows a lot about education and stuff. Inez, great to have you back.
It's great to be here, Buck.
Okay, let's start with this one. I'm seeing some stuff about Montgomery County, which is right outside of D.C., so it gets a lot of attention in the national media, where private schools are now being told that they can't. So it was up to public schools to determine that they could open, but now private schools also were being told that they couldn't, or what happened? What's going on?
Yeah, it's kind of a long saga, but I think it's an illustrative one about how politicized and ridiculous this conversation has gotten, right? So the Maryland public schools are doing localized decisions as to whether or not they open. Teachers unions are lobbying to make sure that not only that public schools don't open, but they don't want to lose what they see as market share of parents that they seem to feel completely entitled to. And so what's happening is they're trying to close down avenues that parents are looking at to actually avoid the disaster of distance learning that most of them experienced in the spring. So one option, of course, is to look at private schools, which were reopening. Unlike public schools, they don't have a guaranteed source of income, just like any other business. They rely on being open to be able to keep the lights on and pay their employees. So a lot of private schools are looking to open. They are taking a lot of precautions in doing so. This is not a sort of blasé reopening, but nevertheless, a lot of private schools are opening when public schools aren't. And so it's created this lobby effort on behalf of teachers unions to close down all options like learning pods, like private schools. Unfortunately, the governor just issued about a day ago, the governor just issued a order that municipalities would not be given the power to arbitrarily close private schools. So the governor stepped in and prevented that situation in Montgomery County, but the same thing is happening all across America.
Right. So this is what I want to ask. It sounds like public school teachers unions are trying to get this to a place where if they can't have your kids to teach, nobody can. That seems to be the policy design.
That's exactly what's happening. And I think parents are getting really frustrated because it is not a negotiation in good faith. So every poll shows that families and parents are worried about staff safety, for example, in a reopening, but they know what teachers and at least some teachers and certainly the unions and the districts refuse to acknowledge, that the last few months of distance learning prior to the summer break was a total disaster for a lot of families and a lot of students. And so that's just not an option. It doesn't seem like a feasible option to a lot of families. But instead of negotiating in good faith about how to reopen during a pandemic, we find teachers unions making absolutely crazy demands, not just related to health and safety, but related to politics, right? So they've demanded that charter schools be closed, that private schools be closed. They've demanded that the police be defunded, right? These are things that have absolutely nothing to do with whether or not it's safe to open public schools in a pandemic. And I think it's really frustrating a lot of parents who might otherwise have wanted to work with the unions and with teachers in good faith. And I think we're going to see an earthquake. I think this is really going to shake up American education for decades to come, because the parents are not going to take this lying down, and they aren't taking it lying down.
What are your expectations for how parents, and there are a lot of parents listening to this right now who are trying to figure out how they will adapt. What are the changes that you see coming to the approach that American parents across the country will take about education, and also their views on how they should have their kids educated going forward?
I think we're seeing the collision of two separate sort of lines of thought here. One is, as I said, the total failure of distance learning. So a lot of families are looking to form what was being called pandemic pods. But prior to this was called microschooling, where you have a few families, let's say, anywhere from 5, 10, 15 students binding together to then hire a teacher or a tutor and have those classroom settings just be smaller and more localized. And a lot of times in the COVID situation, these families are agreeing to try to limit their social interaction to each other. So they're essentially trying to expand their households out. And this is something that actually it's new for this context, but it's not new. It's been going on in Florida for quite some time, because Florida has something called education savings accounts, where some parents can actually take a portion of the funds that are spent on their child for their education, and do exactly that with it. So we have micro schools in Florida that are just a few families deciding they have similar sort of visions for what they want their kids to learn, and then they're combining those scholarships that they're given by the state, those flexible accounts that they're given by the state, and then they're hiring the staff almost as if they were a small school, although they are not regulated as a school. They're not like a open to the public school. They're sort of a little tiny pod, and I think that can become a really good model for a lot of families now. But it'll be open to more families. We saw, the Washington Post, New York Times, right, and teachers unions, of course, all pile on this idea saying it's terrible for, quote, equity, right, because not everybody can afford to do this. Well, first of all, there are families of limited means who have been doing this on their own for years, so tell them that. But it's true that it would be more equitable if we actually passed universal education savings accounts and allowed kids to every kid to have that dollar amount attached to his name actually go to the family to address this challenging time, rather than to go straight to a district school where teachers unions feel entitled to their money but don't feel obligated to actually provide an education. That's what we're seeing right now, and I think parents are fed up, and right to be.
And just on the point about the failures of distance learning, virtual teaching, whatever it is that we're calling it now, I've even heard a lot of Democrats just in passing be like, well, yeah, it was kind of a debacle. Why? How? What were the failures like?
Well, first of all, there are some inherent limitations, obviously, for young kids. Learning from Zoom or learning on a computer with a lot of screen time is not the ideal situation. But there are virtual charter schools that have perfected this over a decade or more and have learned how to deliver education online. But that's not what this was, right? So for starters, only a minority of schools were actually offering live instruction online. The rest of them had some combination of worksheets or like digital platform check-ins, often like multiplying platforms, which is just really frustrating for families. And then we saw some complete abandonment of the instruction purpose of schooling. So, for example, in Chicago, almost half of the teachers didn't even log on to the learning platform at least 3 times a week for the duration of distance learning, meaning those kids just essentially went without instruction. They went without education. They just basically gave up on actually delivering education. And that's the experience that families had in the spring, which is why continuing that distance learning, or that farce of distance learning, seems like such an impossible ask for many families, especially single moms who have to work. There is a real crunch time, real life consequence to this that the unions are just not recognizing, and they're just calling everybody who brings it up as a concern. They're saying, oh, you want people to die, you want, like, they threw a bunch of body bags in front of the district office in DC as part of the protest. And indeed, DC, the district, went from a partial reopen several times a week to fully online this fall because of the protests of teachers unions. But I think they're overplaying their hand.
Inez Felcher, everybody, of the Independent Women's Forum. Inez, always great to have you on. Talk soon.
It's great to be here, Buck. Thanks.
And back by popular demand, the one and only, our favorite intellectual anarchist, the man himself, Michael Malice, is in the mix. He is the host of You're Welcome with Michael Malice, also author of books including The New Right and Dear Reader, an unauthorized biography of Kim Jong-il. What's up, my man? How you doing?
I am doing great here. Greetings from Brooklyn.
Nice, man. So what's happening in America right now, Malice? I want to just toss the ball to you. Tell us what's going on.
I think we're seeing the increasing Cold War between the right, broadly speaking, or even just the left and the anti-left. And I think a lot of organizations that have been in power for a very long time are doubling down on their attempts to stay in this power, which they perceive to be, not entirely incorrectly, a function of the upcoming presidential election.
So you view this then, I would guess, as only likely to get worse and intensify, which I suppose is the expectation that we all have. But are you surprised at all at the hypocrisy and the ferocity of the way the left has embraced this, whether it's the BLM movement, Antifa, all these things together, while putting forward Joe Biden as their candidate? Make sense of that for us.
I don't think it's hypocritical at all. I think how it works, and progressivism for over a century has been based on the concept, and they would call it scientific, envisioning a conclusion and then messing around with the inputs to force the output that you find desirable, whether it's through bureaucrats or whether it's through ideologues. So for them to take any organization or movement and bring it under their rubric is par for the course. I mean, progressivism got its start in the 1890s by being virulently homophobic. There were thriving gay cultures in New York City and other places, but they won't talk about that now. Now, they love gay rights. So any weapon that they will have at their disposal, they will use to further and maintain their control of cultural dominance. But I think things are, and here's a great example. I think things are going badly for them. The New York Times is engaged in a very public assault on our history and trying to redefine America with the 1619 Project as a function of slavery. And if you define America as foundationally based on slavery, then a lot of other things follow suit, like dominoes, logically speaking. And now they've had to push back. The woman who runs it, Ida Wells, she said, oh, we're not saying this is the history. We're just saying this is a history. You wouldn't be having to make that clarification publicly if people, including many leftist historians, weren't calling you out on your nonsense. So I think they're overplaying their hand. And I think, just like any jihadis, they're going for the moderates first, but they don't have the capacity, thank God, to actually execute people. So that is going to drive people in opposition to them, if not necessarily toward Trump, who is almost secondary in this longer battle.
What do you make of the calm with which I think a lot of people, I mean, now we're speaking about hundreds of millions of people, but the way that rights have been chipped away at during the pandemic, where now they will just on a whim, I mean, New York is probably the best example of this, although I know there are others. They'll say, well, you can eat food, but you can only eat it at a restaurant outside, and you can't order drinks alone. You have to order food with your drinks, and you can't order a drink before your food. And I've been joking around with people saying, at what point do they start putting an egg timer on the table outside that you're allowed to eat in? And if you don't, they're going to arrest you. I mean, it seems to me like we're a country that thinks of itself as a big collection of individuals who care about their rights and freedoms and democracy and the Constitution. And when the governor jumps, we all say how high. It's a little disappointing.
Well, H.L. Mencken, the great cynic of times past, said the average man does not want to be free. He simply wants to be safe. I'm not surprised at this because if you go back a generation, look at the Patriot Act. The Patriot Act allowed the government to basically infringe on our rights in myriad ways. Edward Snowden revealed that pretty much all our phone calls are being recorded as a matter of course by the state. And conservatives and Democrats, both who have members of their movements who ostensibly are for privacy rights, blithely every year renew these things without even a mention of this being a huge atrocity in terms of rights and in terms of the Constitution, the Founding Fathers. So it's a lot easier to put over ideas when there is a legitimate crisis, when people are sincerely dying. But in terms of broader issues, I see very little pushback among Americans, despite how we're perceived and told that we are, when it comes to infringements on our freedoms. And it is what it is, I guess I could say. I'm not surprised.
The president said that about the pandemic on that Axios interview. It certainly got a lot of
twice.
A lot of heat. I think, and we're speaking of Michael Malice, author of Dear Reader, the unauthorized biography of Kim Jong-il, and also The New Right, a book that I have here on my bookshelf. Michael, there seems to be a very consistent chorus from the anti-Trump, not just left, anti-Trump everything. If only and then there's kind of a pause. We'd be so much better off. All of this is Trump's fault. I never really understand what it's never clear. I shouldn't say I don't understand. It's never clear, if only what? What is it that you think the claim really is? If Trump hadn't done the following, we wouldn't be in this circumstance. It seems like the data does not support the idea that the American experience with COVID-19 is uniquely bad, especially when you look at our general health as a population, which I know no one wants to talk about. Diabetes and heart disease are the two biggest mortality risks other than age that people have for this. And America is in a class by itself in those areas. But what are we supposed to have done differently according to the left as you see it, other than just not have Trump be president?
I think what they are reacting to is a population and a nation that does not regard them as worthy of praise and does not waste time engaging in conversation with their stupid opinions. And when you have, this is unprecedented. You had George W. Bush, Romney, McCain. They all felt comfortable engaging with and having discussions on the left's terms. President Trump is saying, no, we're not having this conversation. You guys are an abomination. And he often refers to the fake news as the enemy of the people. He said this yesterday. I have a similar expression. So this causes them enormous existential grief, because if you are a moral busybody whose focus in life is domination and controlling people's lives, controlling their money, controlling how they live, and you have an establishment in the White House that is not even going to give you the time of day, this will cause you enormous psychological distress. And I think that is what they are, if not explicitly referring to, emotionally responding to.
Isn't it fair to say, I mean, some of these signals that we've seen, especially from the more Antifa full protests that have happened, what do you, as somebody who's an actual anarchist, Michael, what do you make of these people in Portland who say they're Antifa and then they run up to black cops and scream in their faces and spit at them and say that they're race traitors and all this? What does any of this have to do with actual anarchism?
Well, I mean, they're referring back to the original anarchism in the late 19th century, which was very much based on anti-police, which viewed the police as a function of capitalist control. There's a monument in cemetery in Chicago to the Haymarket martyrs. Right. These were 7 men who were killed simply for their political views when a police officer was killed by a bomb, even though several of them weren't even present at the location. So this goes back a long way. However, it's just fascinating to see how, if you watch the corporate press, these people apparently don't exist. I'm sure you probably saw the video where Gerald Nadler, from the House chairman, was asked about, Antifa violence, and he's just said it's a myth that this doesn't exist. So, the New York Times will put on page A1 above the fold an article about some kid who watched Ben Shapiro videos, and then as a result of YouTube started watching more nefarious videos, and then kind of reverted to the mean. But when you have people engaged in, and movements engaged in wholesale violence and wholesale disrespect towards the police, they simply act as if they don't exist.
Michael Malice, everybody, author of The New Right. Check it out. Also, go watch You're Welcome with Michael Malice. And maybe he'll have me back on his show at some point. We'll have a longer conversation. Mr. Malice,
Thanks,
good to see you.
Take care.
It's time for roll call.
Roll call time, everybody. Hey, producer Mark, just saw this one. In case you ever get tired of the Buck Sexton show, there's a new job opportunity. Huawei, the banned Chinese company, is seeking a director of government relations in Washington, D.C. to develop and maintain effective relationships with federal government officials.
Perfect. I'll send my resume.
Yeah, you want to be that guy? He was like, hey, guys, come on. So the Chinese company wants to help destroy America and, take over the future of the world. We can make some money here, folks, That's one way to go. They probably would pay pretty well. But that's not a job that I think anybody would. It's a little bit like being a big tobacco lobbyist after all the lies from Big Tobacco have come out and people are like, oh, so you guys really were suppressing the science about how this kills people. So, yeah, you don't want that gig. That's a tough one. You ever smoked a cigarette, producer Mark?
No, I don't enjoy killing myself.
Yeah, I've never.
I do that with food.
I have never smoked a cigarette in my life. I got to tell you. I don't know. Yeah, exactly. If I'm going to have a vice, it's going to taste delicious. and preferably have either an excess of sugar or cheese or something like that.
Yeah,
Those are my
I never got
weaknesses,
the
man.
allure of smoking a cigarette.
Cheese and sugar are the things that really get me.
Cheese and chocolate.
Yep. Oh, man, I'm getting hungry just thinking about it. All right, let's get to roll call. Remember to go to bucksexton.com. Also, we're doing Buck Briefs these days. You got to check them out. You can do so on Facebook or on Instagram. If you're not following me on Instagram, what's going on? Buck Sexton on Instagram. You should be checking it out. We're posting show content there now. We are using that platform. Not going to be doing TikTok yet, that's for sure. Not until
if TikTok gets bought, will you agree to do some dances for the TikTok
If
audience?
TikTok gets bought by an all-American company with Microsoft, then I might do some Buck shuffle dances and show people how we get down. Show everybody my funky moves.
You can do the dances and put like little captions about America.
Oh yeah,
like your
for
opinions
sure.
on stuff.
I'll do a dance for American freedom, baby. Woo! That's the plan. All right. Mike kicks us off here. Hi, Buck. The rules are demonstrably, presumptuously, and unapologetically different for our federal, congressional, and bureaucratic royals these most recent decades. They glare with indignation and quickly dismiss any commoner's public challenge to their privilege. Oddly, Americans must have some odd fascination with them, voting them back in every 2 years. Castle Doctrine, shields high. Mike, the political class in this country loves to exempt themselves and expects different treatment from what the rest of us have. I think that's really an irrefutable point at this stage. That's, if you go back to the origins of English common law, and you even go back to Magna Carta in 1215, signed on the fields of Runnymede. If you go back to Magna Carta, the big evolution in Western civilization and jurisprudence specifically was there got to be rules that everyone is held accountable to and that you can't break. There got to be rules, real rules that we can all understand, that are clear, and that are applicable to everyone. If there is anybody for whom there are no rules whatsoever, then we got a problem. And if there's a whole class of people for whom there are no rules, we got really big problems. So I do insist on continuing to point out the ways in which our current legal system and just the application of laws and regulations is inconsistent based upon political expediency. I got a big problem with that. Very, very big problem with that. Ona. Hi, Buck. I live in Redding, California. We are the true Northern California. My grandsons are 8 and 10. My daughter just told me they'll be going back to school, usually the middle of August. Masks worn only to and from the classroom, not in the classroom. The children will only be with each other, lunch eaten in the classroom, recess only with their classmates. We're thankful for this concession. There is a petition I signed to recall Gavin Newsom. Whatever the reason he's opening the schools, we'll take it. My heart goes out to you for being locked down still. Our law enforcement in Redding is more relaxed, for which we are grateful. Thank you for what you continue to do. Thanks for being our voice. Blessings and shields high. Well, Ona, thank you so much for your kind note and for letting us know what's going on with schools in California. The school opening issue is going to just get even more contentious. And I want to just ask the people that think that lockdown is, what is the end game here? When do we stop doing this? When the virus is under control? If that is the standard, then let's all be, and we believe everything else they say about mask wearing and social distancing and all this stuff. The moment that we go back to living our lives, the virus will not be under control. So what are we doing? Oh, it is lockdown until vaccine. They just won't tell us that. Oh, no, I'm sorry. It's lockdown until election. That's what we're all going through. They are stealing a year of Americans' lives from them. That is what the government is currently doing. That's what is happening. And the public health experts who have been wildly unimpressive this whole time. What have they known? What have they told you that you didn't know from the first week of this? Wash your hands, wear a mask, social distance. We all know that from just dealing with colds and flu in our normal lives, that those are things that we do. Do they work? I don't know. We all get colds and flu anyway. But we try. What is the great public health policy I'm speaking about? Innovation here. What have they come up with to test and trace? Yeah, that's been a disaster. But, people want to believe. They want to believe that the experts can save them all, and that if only we had listened more, if only we were more obedient little serfs in this country, we wouldn't all be subject to this disease still. It's nonsense, but that's what they think. Eric, hey, Buck, it's been a while, but I have 2 questions. Who is the Snow Princess, and how do we outlaw strawberry ice cream? On a side note for producer Mark, Cinnamon Life is the best. Producer Mark, what say you to this Cinnamon Life claim?
Yes, Cinnamon Life cereal.
Yes.
It is the best. Absolutely.
Yes.
That is my favorite cereal. My wife thinks I'm nuts, and a lot of people think I'm nuts, but it is.
Hey, look, I think cinnamon is a great and underutilized spice. So, and I told you, I love Cinnamon Toast Crunch, man.
Cinnamon French toast.
Oof.
My favorite thing.
Oof. It's really, really good. So, Snow Princess is my girlfriend, and that's where we leave that. And then, how do we outlaw strawberry ice cream? I don't know. Good question. We got to speak to our local representatives about that. I found something out. I was very startled when I was told this. Who really likes really likes strawberry ice cream and has some on hand pretty much at all times? My own wonderful parents, 2 great, fantastic, patriotic Americans. They like strawberry ice cream. So I don't know. At least we know strawberry ice cream, liking or not liking, is not a genetic thing. It can skip a generation. They like it, producer Mark. What can I say?
I know. We brought it up. They can have one flaw.
Yeah, I know. No one's
They're allowed.
perfect. They like strawberry ice cream. It's okay.
They like strawberry ice cream. You can never show up places on time. Everyone has their flaws.
Exactly. No one's perfect. Zach, hey, Buck. First off, producer Mark is the best. But don't worry, runner-up ain't bad. There we go. I completely agree with your long-standing correct opinion on not bestowing titles to public officials after they leave the office. It perpetuates the faux royalty that public service has become. Pro tip, to support your exception on retired military keeping their rank, when you are placed on inactive roles retired, you are still technically in the military for the rest of your life, subject to UCMJ, and with the potential to be recalled to active duty if needed. Zach, very, very interesting. Very worthwhile addition to our thought process here on the keeping up of the titles. So, yes, indeed. And you're still subject to being called up to duty if need be. And I just also, I think that there's a special honorific for serving in the government is different than, as far as serving in the military is different than, I was the ambassador to Kosovo for a year. And we all have to be like, oh, Mr. Ambassador. And look, I'm just going to say it because I saw today there was an interview on Fox News with Dr. Jill Biden. Her name is Jill Biden, okay? She's a doctor of education, which is not a doctor. She has a PhD in education. I'm sorry. I know people the PhDs in the audience can get mad at me. That's fine. But you are, Joe Blow or Jane Blow PhD. I do not think that everyone has to run around calling you doctor all the time. I mean, do we have to call people who have an honorary doctorate doctor? No, I think doctor is for MD, medical doctor. Boom. Dropping some truth bombs. So there we have it. I mean, I don't. It's like a lawyer who insists on always being called or always writing, Esquire at the end. It's like, come on, really? But some people do. You'd be surprised. Hunter, hey Buck, my name is Hunter and I am 13. I am from Spokane, Washington. I love listening to the program. You are extraordinarily talented in what you do. Your Alex Jones impression cracks me up every time. Keep it up, Buck. And producer Mark, shields high.
Well, Hunter, look, I got to tell you something right now. You got to stop listening to Buck Sexton because he is part of the Illuminati. He is a deep state plot with the CIA to take over the government. He's gonna do things to amphibians that will blow your mind. Part of an alien plot to also use the plot with the King of England, who's not even a person, and all the Illuminati and the Bilderbergs come together. And there you go. Google it. Read it. Check it out. It's true. Stop listening to Buck Sexton. Telling you too much stuff's not true. Also, that guy's hair can't be real. Can't be real, I tell you right now. I've seen it. I've seen the schematics. It's TS cleared only. Buck Sexton's hair is fake. It's part of a government plot.
So there you go, Hunter. Thanks for listening, my man. Appreciate it. Alex, hey, Buck, I've been enjoying your show every day since this pandemic started. Needed somebody to actually tell the news. You've been doing great. Keep up the good work. Thank you, Alex. You were talking about mail-in ballots a little on Thursday or Friday, and I saw a meme that applies. It basically says, imagine you won the Powerball. Would you send it in the mail or go yourself to turn it in? Same situation for mail-in ballots. Thanks again. Yeah, Alex, I would not trust the mail to get it done. That's for sure. Mail-in ballots are going to be fraught with problems and challenges and shortcomings. Oh, my. Thank you very much for writing in. I appreciate it. Shields high. All right, more roll call here. We have Nanette in the mix, and we're just trying to get the show on with Isais bearing down on us here with terrible winds and rain and lions and tigers and bears. Oh my, it's crazy here right now. I hope there's not a tornado ripping through Manhattan anytime soon. It looks pretty dark out there. All right, we have what's up here? We have Nanette. Buck, I love the Fauch and Cuomo. As an Indiana girl who spent a few weeks every summer fishing in Minnesota, got to tell you, too much Minnesota in your Gretchen Wilson Michigander. Well, what does the Fauch think about this? The Fauch wants you to know that if you mitigate the Michigander or mitigate the Minnesota in your Michigander, the data will tell you that you're less Michigan and more Minnesota. That's what it'll tell you. But what does Cuomo say? Cuomo wants you to know that Michigan is not Minnesota. How do we know Michigan is not Minnesota? Minnesota on a map looks a little bit like a glove or perhaps a mitten. What is a mitten? A mitten is what you put on your kid when you want them to look like a little kid because a glove is too adult looking. Why is a glove too adult? Because their little fingers all stay together in the mitten where it is warm, unlike a glove where their fingers separate, which could, in fact, result in less insulation. What do I mean by insulation? All right, you get the idea. I don't know. Producer Mark, can you tell the difference between a Michigander and a Minnesota accent? Because I'm just a yuppie from NYC, man. I can't tell the difference at all.
No, it's just like telling the difference between New York, New Jersey, Long Island, all the same.
Yeah. New York and New Jersey, they definitely think that they have very different accents, but I don't think that the tonal variations really are all that different at all. John, Shields High, Real News fan. I recently attempted to engage in a discussion about how America is divided. My point was that the Democrats, the media, have been dividing us for decades. Al Gore in Florida and Trump the last 4 years are pretty obvious examples. The other guys seem to get upset at this, claiming that both sides are responsible for dividing the country or that it's Trump doing this, but he didn't openly say that. Just wanted your thoughts. Commie Bear lives. John, yeah, libs are always going to think that Trump is the one who is responsible for dividing the country. No one else has ever divided the country before Trump. He's the worst. It's all Trump, yada, yada, all that stuff. And you're never going to convince them otherwise. So just understand that liberals have convinced themselves of certain things about Trump that are not, they are impervious to additional facts or reality. So you're not going to win that argument, man. But I appreciate you staying in the fight, and I have been thinking more about that little furry commie bear character from the earlier iteration of the Buck Sexton show, and I'm starting to think maybe he needs to make a return, but it'll be a triumphant one. Tony, at least one listener listens to all 5 hours of programs you do a day. Wow, Tony, that is really humbling and very kind of you. I listen to WOR live, and I and my newly listening wife listen to your national show later. Thank you for all your hard work. It is appreciated. Well, Tony, you're in the 5 hours of Buck Club, my man. 5 hour Buck. That's a special place. I don't even know if I have any relatives in the 5 hour Buck Club. So thank you so much for that. And it's really meaningful. Yeah, guys, I do a show in New York City as well on WOR radio. So there you have it. Thought. Oh, Tony's got more. It is the devil's greatest achievement that he convinced the world the devil does not exist. It is the Democrats' greatest achievement. They convinced people of color the Democrats care about them. Best to you, the Snow Princess, and Tallulah, as well as producer Mark. But you are number one. Well, thank you, especially since that other person said producer Mark is number one. Gonna give him a big head, although I'm the one. You know, Mark, I actually got a special size baseball cap that fits. I found a special site that makes hats for huge-headed people.
They make hats for horses now?
Apparently. And it does fit. I have a baseball hat that fits.
Is it just a generic baseball hat, or what's on the hat?
Yeah, it's like just a generic cap for giant-headed people like me. So it fits, though. I mean, maybe I'll even take a photo and make fun of myself and say, look, I finally have a hat that fits. Look at that. I had to special order it, though.
What's your head size?
This was the equivalent of like double XL.
Okay. Well, because the fitted hat sizes go to like 7, 8, you know.
No, it's beyond that, man.
It's like
On the 10-point scale, I'm an 11. That's the show today, everybody. Stay safe, stay dry, shields high.